The Smashing Machine, directed by Benny Safdie, who previously had made Uncut Gems starring Adam Sandler, now tells the tale of UFC legend Mark Kerr. Played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, or probably more preferably for this review, Dwayne Johnson, Mark Kerr is shown through his life for a 3-year period between 1997 and 2000s, battling his life at home with addiction and also inside the ring. There's a lot of hype going into this movie, particularly because of the performance of Dwayne Johnson, and I will want to talk about that, but first, I want to talk about the story behind this movie beforehand. I think the way that this story is laid out is done fairly well. There are things that I do wish were a little bit better in this, for sure. I think the pacing is a little bit too slow for me personally, but I do find enjoyment out of the battles that Mark Kerr had to deal with during this time. You see how his life is when he goes to Japan with like the startup of what UFC was becoming, because this stuff was happening prior to the big boom of this sort of industry. So it's nice seeing kind of the first kind of iteration of this sport happening with these legends that most people know about to this day. I did not know anything about Mark Kerr, honestly, before this movie, and quite honestly, I don't really watch any UFC, so it's not something that I really keep up with, but I could say that I have a better understanding of what this guy was back in the day, and man, it's a pretty riveting story, I think, at points. I do find a lot of the opioid addictions sort of stuff to be there at points, but it kind of falls off sometimes. I think the story more or less revolves around Mark Kerr and in the ring sort of stuff than it does with his addictions at times. But it's almost like the movie has different phases that it wants to go through with Mark, because not only do you have to deal with Mark inside the ring and how he deals with winning and losing and what that kind of does to his psychosis, he also has to deal with his addictions that he has with painkillers, and then eventually it leads to a toxic relationship that he has, to then leading to his redemption story, basically. And I think that if they would have tightened up the script a little bit and they would have kind of shown a couple things a little bit beforehand and tightened up some things here or there, maybe make some things kind of flow a little bit easier, I think that the story would have been a bit better, but it's serviceable nonetheless. I also love how the film looks. It's shot very documentary, home video style. There is some graininess that you'll see at the beginning of the movie where it shows his first fight that he does have, and it kind of just keeps that steady hand, shaky cam kind of feel where it just like looks like someone's got their camera out just videotaping somebody the whole time. And it works for the most part here. I don't know if it would have had like stationary shots, if it would have looked any better. It probably would have looked a little bit more movie formulaic than this, but I found the camera movement and the style in which that they were doing this made the story feel a little bit more raw. It felt a little bit more real, and that's obviously what they're going for, and I think it accomplishes that. And really what holds this entire film up, honestly, from it really falling apart in any sort of aspect, is the performances throughout. Acknowledging the giant rock in the room, let's talk about Dwayne Johnson for a second. He has had a very big up and down career when it comes to Hollywood. He's definitely had some highs with some great success in a lot of different films and franchises, but he's also hit some rock bottoms after a while, and it's nice to see that Dwayne Johnson has taken a step forward and rather playing his character as himself in most movies now, and has really taken the challenge of being an actor and engulfing yourself in a character and in a story and bringing it to the big screen. And what really helps with that is the prosthetic work that they've done for him. Obviously, if you look hard enough, it just looks like Dwayne Johnson and prosthetics. Yes, you can't completely change a character's sort of face, for the most part, not counting Colin Farrell as the Penguin, honestly. But regardless, the prosthetics do a really good job in trying to mirror Dwayne Johnson's look of what Mark Kerr looked like back in this time frame. And some of the other stuff I did enjoy with him is how Benny Safdie in some interviews had talked about that, and so has Dwayne Johnson, where he had to put on even more muscle than he did before to get this look, because Mark Kerr was like this gigantic dude in the ring. And again, the prosthetics, the makeup, all that sort of stuff. I really hope if this film does get an Oscar nomination, which has been kind of speculated for a while now at this point, I at least hope that it gets nominated for the best makeup department at this point, because the work that they did on this was really spectacular. But aside from that, is Dwayne Johnson any good in the role as Mark Kerr? And I would say yes. It's honestly probably my favorite role that he's done. Not counting like the fun stuff that he does, because it's nice to see him play Hobbs and Shaw or any of these Fast and Furious movies and be like a more adult version of the Rock character from WWE, or the final boss character is probably my favorite interpretation of him, but that's a wrestling, character. That's not a movie portrayal. So I would definitely say this is probably his best work to this point. A lot of the emotion feels raw and it's intense, and it comes across because he's a guy who was an athlete. He wanted to be an NFL star, and then that fell through, and then he became one of the biggest stars in pop culture history with pro wrestling. And you can see how a lot of the similarities that Mark Kerr had in his life with dealing with loss could translate to how Dwayne Johnson could really engulf himself in this story. There are plenty of scenes in this that I do enjoy with it. There's scenes where Mark Kerr breaks down and starts crying over a certain aspect in the story. There's a really big argument scene towards the tail end of this movie that I thought was fantastic. Emily Blunt as his co-star, also really good. She plays his girlfriend Dawn at this time frame, and Emily Blunt's just a great actress in general, but I like how she bounces off Mark and Dwayne Johnson, I guess, in this movie. Her character, though, is a little strange at points, because she starts out at one place and then the altering life stuff starts to happen to Mark in the movie, and then her character starts to change, and I'm not exactly down with how specifically her attitude starts to change, just because of what happens to Mark in an instance. I won't say much more than that, but when you start to see the rest of the film, I do think that some of the addiction stuff takes a bit of a backseat in the story for a toxic relationship sort of story to kind of start seeping through. And that's kind of my main problem with this, is while there is some hand-holding, I would say, throughout the narrative, and it is kind of like, I get it, I know what you're trying to go for, there are points where it does feel a little underdeveloped. It feels like these characters are not, outside of Mark Kerr, for the most part, some characters are really not developed well. Maybe it's his friend. Honestly, Mark Coleman is probably the second best developed character in this. But Emily Blunt, for the work, that she has going for this, the script, how it has it written for her, I think is a justifiable performance. All in all, I did stand up and not give it a 15-minute standing ovation, but I did stand around with my friends for a little more than 15 minutes just talking about this movie after it ended. Nevertheless, it is a very solid movie. I did enjoy the movie. It is held up together by performances more than anything else, and I'm glad that Dwayne Johnson actually stretched his acting sort of chops a little bit. If he's going to be going out, and the reports are is that he's going to be in a Martin Scorsese movie sooner rather than later, this is a good step in the right direction for him to kind of change the perspective on him and really try to be like, no, he's not really much of a wrestler, big box office attraction type guy. He actually is an actor, and he's trying his best. Take a hint from Batista. I mean, Dave Batista is probably the best wrestler turned actor in the entire industry. Look at his filmography. And John Cena is well on his way to start doing more of that, more so with the Peacemaker stuff to fall back on. Dwayne Johnson never really had anything like that to me outside of the Fast and Furious stuff, and I didn't honestly watch most of that, but it never felt like this is a character that Dwayne Johnson's playing. It just feels like The Rock kind of notched a little bit more in the, rated R type of stuff that you could kind of gear toward in those movies. This is more of a step in the right direction for character stuff for him, and I can't wait to see what he does next. I'm going to give The Smashing Machine 3.5 stars. Thank you guys so much for watching. Look forward to more reviews very soon. You can check the link down below for all the socials for my Twitter, my Letterboxd, and my TikTok, where I'll be spouting stuff about football, because it's football season right now. There's Letterboxd for reviews of stuff that rewatching and watching for the first time on there, for stuff that I might not get a chance to see and review on here. And then TikTok, where I just, spout a bunch of shit. I recently just talked about how children these days don't know about Spider-Man mac and cheese shaped noodles anymore, and how, the culture is different now, and it's really annoying because I'm weird like that. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Keep those cinemas alive, and I will talk to you all next time.